Okay, it is now 1 o'clock, so we are going to begin our webinar. We have a lot of wonderful information here, and I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of questions, so we want to get as much in as we can. My name is Nick Obel, and I'm a Senior Transportation Specialist at Commute Seattle. Today's webinar is presented by King County Metro, and it's COVID Transportation Information. Before we get started, I just wanted to do a couple of quick housekeeping items. Number one, we cannot hear or see you. If you would like to ask a question, please post it in the Q&A box. That's separate from the chat box, so make sure that you're posting it there. Also, we're going to have 4 different Metro employees that are going to be presenting on different topics today. So if you wouldn't mind putting their name before the question so that we specifically know who you're asking it to, that would be wonderful. Their names are Sean Hawks, Graydon Newman, Salam Tekel, and Rocco DeVito. They'll be presenting in that order. We'll have a short Q&A section after each presentation and then hopefully a longer one at the end. If we don't get to your questions directly, each presenter will be answering the questions in the Q&A box to the best of their abilities. And these slides will be sent out after this presentation. We are going to have a recording of this webinar and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, so we'll also send you a link to that. So first up is Sean Hawks. Sean Hawks directs strategic communication and branding for King County Metro. Across the Puget Sound region, Metro provides bus, vanpool, and water taxi services and operates Seattle Streetcar, Sound Transit Link Light Rail, and Sound Transit Express bus services. Prior to joining Metro, Sean led advertising, digital media, messaging, and partnerships for businesses, government agencies, and organizations, philanthropies, and political groups. Sean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Very excited to be here, and some really important work is taking place. So feel free to ask questions either during the presentation or afterwards. So we can actually go to the next slide. I wanted to share, it wasn't so long ago, just back in January, that we had a transit system that was really delivering for our county. So 400,000 daily trips, half of our downtown workforce counting on Metro and transit more broadly. A really equitable system, providing accessible, affordable transit, and also the importance of sustainability. So that was important both for our environment, but also for congestion. Those values continue to guide everything that we do. So if you go forward one slide, please. Since COVID, we've sort of been affirming those values, albeit in a different way. We've been very responsive, again, safety being our absolute first priority, in moving to daily disinfecting, to passenger limits, to physical distancing, to backdoor boarding, at least until in the next couple of months, we'll be moving back to front door once we ensure that that is a safe experience, both for the passenger and for our drivers, and requiring masks. And also, although we've seen a 70% drop in ridership, much of that is good news. We want people to be following the guidance of public health, of their elected officials, in keeping to essential trips and being really purposeful in the times they go out into the public sphere. We also need to keep our region moving and realize we have a lot of transit-reliant customers who continue to need us to get to jobs, to groceries, to medical care. And we also maintain those long-term commitments. We realize the climate crisis has not gone anywhere, and we need to keep planning, not just 6 months out or a year out, but 10 years out, 50 years out, et cetera. So let's step to the next slide. So I talked a lot about the types of steps that we are taking at Metro on health and safety, again, with the safety of our passengers, our employees, our community members. There's a lot of incredible work, but unfortunately that work really is not broadly known. There's roughly 3/4 of our passengers who have really not used transit since March. So much of the incremental improvements, I would say overall it's an overhaul. But we who work in transit have been part of all of those changes. People who've been away from transit are often not aware of them. There's also a lot of misperceptions, unfortunately, about transit being unsafe. So you might think back to some of the early media reports. Back then, there was sort of a conventional wisdom that COVID-19 was spread through much more casual contact than we now know to be true. So increasingly, we're seeing that spread happens in really intimate and extended settings, as opposed to sort of short periods of time. But as any sort of psychology research shows, once you hear something that's not true, it takes an awful lot of work to sort of correct that misconception. So that is to be said, and this will be a great relief, I think, to all of us. Our region will reopen. None of us are sure exactly when or exactly how, but when that happens, transit will be absolutely critical, not just to continuing our recovery and our growth, but ensuring that is an equitable, sustainable growth. So that's good for our environment. That doesn't require you to own a car to move around, and sort of has that forward planning that we sort of build so much around our metro's values, our county's values. And you can go forward just one more slide. So, that really is to say, the future is going to happen with or without transit. And it's the important work that all of us are doing is to share the story of the great work folks are doing to protect health and safety, such that transit continues to be a big part of King County's story and such a great advantage of living in this region. So let's go forward one more slide. So we took a pretty good look, not only at our passengers who are still using our system. So again, I spoke to our transit reliant customers, not just those who are essential workers or relying on transit for essential trips, but we also think of individuals who may be the first to return to transit once businesses are gradually reopening. But for many of our passengers, I'll refer to them here as lapsed passengers, they are out of the habit of using transit. They are nervous. That anxiety often extends, not just to them, but to their families. They're starting to make those thoughts about when and if they return to transit. And I think you can imagine it takes a process. So if you want someone to make a decision in January or February, we need to start laying the groundwork now for letting them know all the steps that are taking place in really close coordination with Public Health, Seattle King County, with the CDC and others to ensure their health and safety on board. And also I'm kind of frequently reminding folks that, we are not the only game in town by any extent. It is a kind of a cacophony of news right now. It's only going to get louder closer to the election, which really, cuts our work out for us in trying to get folks' attention and present this to them in a really understandable, comprehensible narrative. So let's go forward one more beat. So the campaign I'm going to share with you in just a moment was informed, not only with our conversations with our community members, so business partners, colleagues who work with various agencies and organizations. I would love this group's feedback similarly, but also some customer research, both here in Washington State, but also nationally. I'm including on this slide some of what we're hearing. This is APTA research that just came out late last week. Customers are really looking for transit agencies to lead, to take a kind of a key role in restoring the confidence of lapsed passengers. There's two pieces of information, and they're both equally important. One is what transit agencies are doing, how they're innovating and making transit safe, but also what passengers need to do. And our customers are really asking for very prescriptive guidance. So I'll give an example. It's much more effective to say wear a mask or masks are required than it is to sort of gently encourage or to thank people for wearing a mask. They want that kind of passenger empowerment of not just the things that are being done so people can focus on their own experience, but also how they can prepare for their trip. So reminders that gel with this sort of new reality of bringing hand sanitizer, having masks available, a journey that starts, even before you've left your home and extends into your workplace about the new steps that you would take now. They're also looking for a lot of specificity. So cleaning is where we see the most of that. They want to know how often it's happening, even to have those further details should they choose to dig in. And then I'm including on the right of that slide a lot of the sort of best testing phrases, which again, we have used and will continue to use in our communications. These are the types of phrases that give people confidence in the work that's taking place. And let's go forward one more slide. So sort of without further ado, I want to share, and this has not been publicly released yet, the name of our new campaign, New Normal, New Metro. So this achieves a number of different goals. There's a really high bar for what this campaign needs to do. You know, it needs to be accessible. It needs to be durable. You know, we're not sure how long we're going to be in this space, but certainly, you know, you could see this extending for 6 months or even a year. It needs to be inclusive of many language families, communities, modes of transit. It has to be informed, as I shared earlier, by our public health work. In addition to health guidance, it also needs to have information as we continue to update our services. You know, most recently in this upcoming September, our operations, such as when we move to front door boarding and other innovation, it all needs to kind of come under this one central trusted platform. So that's what we're looking to do here. We also wanted to strike a real sweet spot. So neither sort of a status quo, you know, pessimistic tone, nor sort of an overjoyous. But we want to strike a tone of sort of I'll say a credible optimist is what we're looking to do here. News you can use, helpful facts, and tools for planning your trip and keeping yourself healthy and safe during your commute or during your other use of transit. So let's go one beat forward. A lot has changed since we saw you last. Learn what we're doing to keep you safe on transit. So this is just the type of copy we'd look to have through a number of different modes to get people to click through, to go to a website that would have information available in 8 to 10 languages. Also to have some language specific links so that we're getting that information out there and people can plan their trip as they see fit. And let's go one more beat forward, please. Oh, sorry, one back. There you go. Again, we want to make this really readily clear, both visually and in some really tight words, about the things people can expect. So we're sort of making a promise about what we have done, what we continue to do, how we continue to innovate, and also what customers need to do. So this is an early piece. We're also working on some pieces that, actually the piece itself is split into two. Here's what Metro is doing. Here's how passengers need to act as well. So this is everything from upgraded air filters to physical distancing, to health partitions, to disinfecting vehicles, et cetera. And if we go one more step forward, this kind of shares a few more details about all of the ways we're getting this out there. A really strong in-person outreach program with all the advocates and groups that are so important, our business customers, Metro's internal channels, or I should say, Metro's social media, website, blog, et cetera, to reach external audiences. A lot of work with earned media, and also a paid campaign. So you may have seen past Metro paid campaigns rating customers for snow or for various service changes. It'll be those types of channels. So you'll see this on the Seattle Times, on news websites, on digital radio, geo-targeting where possible, including through social media, and a lot of community and in-language print and digital ads as well. So I'm going to go one beat forward. And I believe I've spoken to most of these. So I just want to make it really clear that this is a campaign that really shows the confidence in what we're doing and provides a guidance that, the values that Metro has always stood for will continue to lead everything that we do. So we want to provide a clear vision, not just of moving forward with guidance from public health to serve our customers now, but that we're also continue to be committed to the things we've always planned for in the future. And really have a commitment to building a robust, stronger mobility agency 2, 5, 10 years from now than we are today. So that continues to be our guiding vision. So I'll pause there and would love any questions. I'm just outside of the chat window, but feel free to voice them out loud if that's easier too.
Sean, thank you so much. I know that as an organization that works directly with the employers, we've had a ton of questions around safety and when they are considering their return to the office, how can their employees who previously used transit and don't want to switch to driving, how can they safely encourage them to do that? One question that we have is, how will the mask requirement be enforced?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So that's a great question. We have that in a number of different places. We've tightened up our language a lot. It used to say, please wear. It now says masks required. Our Our customers see that on alert banners when they go to our website. It's included in pretty much every text alert they get or email announcement, social media post. It's on the destination sign when they get to their coach. It's on the front of the coach, the side of the coaches. It's in interior transit ads too. You also see it across our other modes, so water taxi hubs, et cetera. We're also adding it to the door of the coaches. So you'll see it, even as you enter the 2 or 3 doors of any coach, mask required in English and Spanish, and also a symbol. We sometimes experience frustration from our customers, as I understand that operators are not in a position to, enforce this or deny service. For us, that is really allowing operators to focus on the job of driving safely and keeping their customers safe. And not trying to make decisions, particularly with customers who sometimes have disabilities that are not readily apparent. I think we also expect some further guidance, from the governor and others, whether that will stay the same or if that could tighten in the days ahead. But it's certainly a high priority for us. And we're also looking for our employees to increasingly model that behavior. So we've tightened even our internal systems to make sure our employees are leading the way there too.
Excellent. So we probably have another minute or two. There was a question around people who indicate medical conditions and cannot wear a mask. Will there be exceptions for that?
And again, we rely on voluntary enforcement. So, we're not in a position to, ask people for documentation or to even verbalize what their medical condition or disability can't be. Our desire and hope is that everyone wears a mask to the ability that they are able. But we certainly understand their conditions. And again, they're not all visible that prevent people from doing so. And we're not denying service or even, asking or inquiring for folks who may be in that position.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sean. Again, if you do have additional questions for Sean, we will have time at the end. But if you ask those in the Q&A box, which is different from the chat box, Sean will be keeping an eye on that and can maybe answer those questions directly. I now am happy to move forward to Graydon Newman, who is the Seattle and Shoreline Service Planning Team Lead in King County Metro's Transit Service Planning Group. Graydon and his team focus on transit service planning team in the Seattle and Shoreline area and are currently undertaking a major service network redesign to integrate with the Northgate Link Light Rail extension, among other efforts. Prior to joining Metro's service planning group, he focused on long-range planning as part of the agency's strategic planning team. This includes working on the development of Metro's long-range planning, Metro Connects. Prior to joining Metro in 2015, he worked as a multimodal transportation planner in New Jersey, where he earned his master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers University. Graydon, the floor is yours.
Thanks, and I appreciate all the participants we have on today. So I am here to talk about a number of things, and also just want to start by recognizing this has been a really challenging time for everyone, and my work team included. We've really worked to be as adaptive and responsive as possible for our customers to ensure that Metro service is available, that it's meeting people's needs. And we recognize also that travel behavior has really changed drastically for a lot of folks. But many of our customers continue to rely on our system, and we are closely monitoring the usage of our system so that we're able to really inform the adaptation of that in such an uncertain time in a way that meets customer needs. So one thing that I want to address right off the bat is some really activity that we are engaged in with social distancing and bus overcrowding, and how we're responding to that is really closely monitoring the system. We have data feeds that go from our buses to folks that are monitoring that, essentially with 1 day lag time. So we are monitoring that as close to real time as we possibly can. And we do have the ability to add trips where we see a pattern of overcrowding that continues to happen and isn't just a one blip, and really respond to that fairly quickly. And an example of that is Route 193, just to call out one specific one that is emblematic of that process and operating between Federal Way to First Hill. Saw a lot of usage by folks accessing hospitals and essential workers going to work, and potentially others as well. And so we added trips on that service to respond to that overcrowding. And recognizing, we don't have a crystal ball for how people's travel behavior is going to respond, and where we're going to be in 6 months. We're building in that adaptation to our process, and continuing into September, as well as our ability to continue to do that now. We are going to be continuing to monitor and respond to overcrowding in September where possible. We do have some logistical limits on how many trips we can add, but we have worked to increase our ability to respond to those issues as we see them. And we are trying to build into that process the ability to do that. So you can advance that slide, please. Thanks. And Metro has 2 major service changes a year, one in March and one in September. You'll maybe note that recently we had a significant change in service in June, on June 22nd, where we are able to bring back many trips and restore some service in areas that we typically don't have a major service change in June, but trying to respond to those demands where we can. And this fall, we do plan to implement a service change that is fairly significant. Transit service operating in September will roughly be about 85% of service that was operating pre-COVID. So earlier this year in February and March. And it's still quite a big amount of service, 11,000 weekday trips, 122 bus routes. One of the biggest stories in this service change are reductions that have been directed by the City of Seattle to respond to the expiring Seattle Transportation Benefit District. So currently, the City of Seattle and the Seattle Transportation Benefit District funds a significant amount of service, as you'd expect, focused on the City of Seattle, although some service does operate outside of the city. And this is the first of potential additional reductions that we may need to make to respond to that reduction in funding from the City of Seattle. For the fall service change, we really are focusing primarily on all-day routes and throughout the county, and preserving where frequent service where we are able to, as well as restoring peak service where there is sufficient demand to really warrant that additional service. We have noticed in the intervening times between when COVID really started ramping up, and we were seeing a lot of impacts and stay-at-home orders, and that whole deal, how travel behavior changes. We saw a lot of reduction in peak period travel, which, as you might expect, would correspond to a lot more folks working from home. And where we didn't see as much of a reduction in folks using our system was in the midday periods, sometimes in the evening. And we've really seen the demand for our services. Usually it looks like these, if you graphed it out, these 2 big peaks where things spike in the morning, they spike in the afternoon. And in that intervening time, we've really seen that even out, where demand is much more consistent throughout the day. So in response to that, for our fall service change, we really are trying to focus on that all-day network to better serve folks. And we're also reflecting some of the financial realities in our reduction in funding from the City of Seattle, as well as the reduction in demand that we're seeing on the peak period service. So while we will be restoring some peak period only routes, those commuter routes, many will continue to be suspended, particularly those that have other routes where people can access and get to their destinations via another route or another means. So I imagine there may be some questions on that. We do have a lot of information on our Metro Matters blog. That's a great reference for folks. I'm always cognizant of my tendency to speak in jargon because I work with a bunch of people that also speak in jargon. So there's a lot of great plain language information on our blog that that I think employees would benefit from really taking a look at. If we can advance the next slide, I also wanted to, that may be it, yeah. But happy to answer any questions folks may have.
Thank you, Graydon. We do have a couple of questions. One is, when ridership returns to normal levels, will the frequency of highly used routes be increased so social distancing measures can be kept in place?
It's a great question. So the load limits that, and by that I mean the passenger limits of I think 12 for a conventional 40-foot bus, and then 18 for the longer buses with the kind of accordion joint in the middle. That significantly reduces the amount of people that we can carry while being socially distant. And we are trying to allocate the most service to the routes that are in most demand. So as demand returns, we will focus on responding to that demand as it does appear. I do want to recognize that with social distancing limits in place, and particularly thinking about those load limits, that is such a severe constraint that meeting the demand while having those capacity limitations is something that is just extremely difficult to meet for any agency throughout the nation. So that is something that is probably not possible if, say, if magically full demand, all of our riders that were riding in February started to return to this system. That would be just a level that would not match up with our ability to meet with the load limits in place. But that said, as we will be working to meet demand by adding buses and trips where we're able to, and adapt, particularly as we move into different phases of social distancing that will look to our state and local governments, as Sean mentioned, and the best guidance available to guide our policies on that.
Thank you. Do you know, with sort of the anticipated loss of funding, whether Metro anticipates a fare raise?
That I don't know. That is a bit out of my bailiwick, to be honest.
It might be a good question for Rocco when we talk about business services and the cost of those. But just one more question: are the load limits that you spoke about, are those Metro imposed, or are they imposed by the state?
So those are determined by Metro. They are taking guidance from the state and from essentially the best sources we have available. So essentially from the research community, from the medical community, from the CDC, from authoritative sources that are establishing essentially the same social distancing guidance for any activity. So distance between people, and really, like Sean spoke to, really taking the best research and applying it to our specific field. So those load limits we're looking at proximity to other passengers, and essentially trying to integrate those proximity elements and the guidance with masks, et cetera, into the specific confines of a bus. So we essentially looked at a bus, and it was a fairly robust process, I also would add, and adapted the social distancing guidance that exists for any kind of indoor environment to our bus environment.
Great, thank you so much. And again, if you have more questions for Graydon, please enter those in the Q&A box, and he can take a look at those and hopefully answer some of them. And we probably will have time at the end for additional questions. Thank you, Graydon.
Thanks all.
Next up, we have Salam Tekel. Salam is here from King County Metro and is representing the Mobility Services Work Group. She is responsible for coordinating and assisting commuters with starting a new van, ensuring customers meet program guidelines, providing best practices for a successful group, retaining existing customers with ongoing assistance, and recruiting tips and promoting the commuter van benefits to various stakeholders. Salam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. Well, again, thank you everyone for being here. So I'm here to talk about our Vanpool and Vanshare. Again, it's just a little recap what Vanpool and Vanshare is. Vanpool and Vanshare consist of a group of people working together for a better commute, who live and work in similar areas. Monthly fare usually covers gas, maintenance needs, insurance, and all tolls. Usually monthly fare covers about a monthly bus pass, so it's pretty comparable. A Vanshare is their first and last mile solution to getting to work from a bus, ferry, train, or link light rail. And at this time, King County Metro, we have suspended fares for the month of July and August. And I think I would say we stopped since April, where we have not collected fares. And in support of social distancing, we've also temporarily reduced our ridership to 2, which allows existing and new groups who commute have the desire to add more riders. They're more than welcome to. But again, we are more implementing of social distancing of 2+ riders. And if we can go to the next page, please. And as always, we encourage our groups to work together to keep everyone safe, healthy for their Vanpool commute to work. Just some participant messagings that we sent out to groups, to existing, as well as new groups. Recommending face covering, masks are required. We ask that all groups follow public health guidelines, such as, instructed to stay home when sick, wash, sanitize hands frequently, cover your coughs and sneeze, and also regularly sanitizing high-touched areas such as door handles, disinfecting steering wheels, things of that nature. And also we do provide a no-contact van maintenance, so it allows participants to securely drop off and pick up their vehicles for maintenance needs at our contracted garages. And also the flexibility of Vanpool Commute. At this time, we also are currently offering an emergency Vanpool program where it's for essential workers that have been impacted by the transit reductions. We also, with Vanpool, offer flexibility of reduced work schedules. We provide various options such as commuting 3 days, 4 days a week, so employees with reduced schedules can utilize the Vanpool. We also groups can split their time in the van, where it allows groups or participants who have reduced work schedules be able to still commute in the van as well. We also suggest and recommend doing sometimes a bike/commute Vanpool, just offering that flexibility of utilizing other sources of method of transportation. And also a nice benefit as well is that we do offer bike racks. So for those folks who like to bike in and take the Vanpool home, things like that. And also, let's see. So yeah, for our online, we also do offer, we made it much easier for groups to get started. So we do have an option on our website where to be able to start a new group where we offer online forms. Groups have the ability to attach their applications and answer some questionnaires. And it definitely does expedite in getting them onto the road quicker. All right, we can go to the next slide. And again, if you have any questions in regards to the Vanpool, we have our website, www.kingcounty.gov/metrovans, where participants can start a van, join an existing Vanpool, or find a Vanpool.
Thank you, Salam. Does anyone have questions about Vanpool or Vanshare right now?
Sorry, no, I went really quickly there.
And if not, we also will have additional time at the end where questions can be asked. Okay, well, thank you so much, Salam. We are going to continue moving forward. Next up is Rocco DeVito. Rocco is a customer relationship manager at King County Metro. He helps manage ORCA passport accounts with medium and large-sized businesses and coordinates commute trip reduction activities with Eastside jurisdictions and businesses. Prior to Metro, Rocco worked at a Seattle startup where he managed a customer service team. Rocco, take it away.
Hello, thank you all for coming today. I want to talk to you a little bit about ORCA passport programs. I know that a lot of folks who are attending today are part of our passport program and have a lot of questions about what's available. We wanted to reach out to folks who need any changes due to COVID or who are struggling. We can help you with short-term suspension of passes. This is where we would just bring your account to a close a little bit early, keep your cards kind of frozen but available for when folks start returning to the office. If you do have some people going to the office and you're looking to cover a smaller number of people for a short period of time until you can come back to Passport, we can certainly work with you to bring you onto an ORCA Choice program. That would be a month-to-month program specifically for employees who need those passes. We are also coming up on our usual schedule to readjust our prices for the year. So it's going to be on September 1st. People who renew in September will have significantly reduced prices because our area passport is determined by the overall ridership of an area. So we are looking at prices coming down approximately 40 or more % throughout the year. And if you reach out to your representative, we'd be more than happy to go over all of your options for the area. As an example, downtown Seattle should be seeing renewal prices below $500. So that will be, hopefully, we believe will help a lot of our customers in these times. If you have questions about your specific account, please do reach out to your representative or to myself. I'll put my email in the chat box. Feel free to reach out and let me know what your needs are, and we can definitely get you in touch with a rep. I know that there's a lot of questions about business accounts, and I'd be more than happy to take some of those with the time we have.
Thank you, Rocco. There was a question. Could you just again share the difference between ORCA Passport and ORCA Choice?
No problem. So the ORCA Passport program is our annual program. It covers all benefit eligible employees at a work site for a lower annual fee or lower price. We can cover your employees with unlimited transportation options. That includes Rideshare. So anybody on the call who has a passport program, do know that your van shares would be included 100% under those contracts. The ORCA Choice program is our retail program. That will allow a business to issue cards specifically to employees who want to travel by transit, and you can choose how much or what types of passes to include on those cards. And that's a little bit more flexible, whereas opposed to the passport, which will cover all employees at a lower rate.
Thank you. And now would be a great time to open up questions for all of our panelists. We do have a couple of service-related questions that hopefully Graydon or Sean would be able to answer. The first is, what is the load limit for light rail, and how is the frequency of service changed for those routes?
Sure. First, so our partners over at Sound Transit are basically the policy setters for their link light rail, but the service has, as far as service frequency, has been reduced. That at this point, service is about every 20 minutes on weekdays until right around, I think, 9 p.m. And then on nights and weekends, it's every 30 minutes. So as far as load limits, I'm not aware, others on this call maybe, I'm not aware of any load limits other than guidance to remain socially distant and wear masks. And so that by socially distant, I mean the 6 feet separation between passengers. So that's what I'm aware of. This may be something I can follow up on with our Sound Transit colleagues.
Excellent, thank you. And another one for you. Is additional water taxi service, specifically late evenings and weekends, being considered?
At this point, for our Marine Division planning on water taxi, we have 2 routes, the Vashon route and then the West Seattle route. We have increased service starting June 22nd to essentially what we used to call our winter schedule. So it's really commuter oriented. And that is something that I think is what we envision for the near term. But we are still considering, as we ramp up, additional additional frequencies and operating, particularly as the West Seattle Bridge is closed. However, we don't have any immediate plans to do that, and again, that does bring up some of the question of funding that service, which we don't have funds currently identified for that at this point.
Great. Thank you. And this is more of a general question that was asked, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but due to current capacity and service changes, route changes, and just the fact that not as many people are able to fit onto a bus and the frequency is less, what would you say to someone who is worried that a bus route that they are previously dependent on might not be able to get a seat on a bus in the time periods that they would need for their commuting, for their school, et cetera? What sort of plans would you encourage people to implement?
Right, there's a few things. This kind of cuts across a lot of the customer communications that we're putting out, and so maybe I'll offer a few, and others can add if they'd like. I think one thing is that we are taking really significant steps that Sean outlined to make our service as safe as possible. And I think one thing I would also suggest is if there is flexibility in when you take your trip, that was something I would consider communicating to that person, those people traveling at off-peak times, so not when we feel like demand is the highest. And so generally outside of the traditional commute times is something I'd suggest, particularly as more people return to work at work sites, if they aren't now. So that would be a suggestion. And let's see, other folks, I would like to add that. Sean, anything from you?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've been monitoring really carefully across routes and trips since March, when we went to a reduced schedule, because we didn't see the same changes on some routes and trips as we did on others. We've added back some service where there was that increased demand. And there's a lot of work taking place to continue to do that, to be responsive, both what we're seeing in prior days or prior weeks, but also to potentially have some buses ready to go. So when an operator has to pass up customers because the bus is at capacity, they're able to essentially radio back and to send a bus to the best of our ability to pick up those passengers to ensure they get where they need to go in a timely fashion. So those are some of the steps we're taking, but we, as Graydon shared, we're certainly also asking passengers to add a little bit of extra time into their travel. I would say too, on West Seattle, that's a really telecommuting heavy place to live right now. We're not seeing basically the capacity right now is meeting the demand. So we're looking at absolutely everything, both now and in the future, including water taxi. But right now, again, the capacity is sufficient for the demand that we're seeing. So I also did sort of an approach to West Seattle in the chat for those who can see that too.
And I'll add one more thing related to the September service change. I mentioned our kind of more immediate ads and more real-time monitoring where we can add trips. But as part of the September service change, we are also adding back scheduled service in areas where we saw there was consistent overcrowding. So I guess that would be one area where I would try to instill some confidence in folks that we are responding to those issues as we see them. And I think potentially modifying your travel times or your travel when you would travel, and then, like Sean said, budgeting for a little bit more travel time would be prudent steps.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really great answer. And I might just add, on the employer side of things, we are really working with employers to encourage them to have flexible work schedules. So allowing people to start earlier, allowing people to start later and work later. To continue to telework where possible is going to be really essential during this time when we do have lower capacity and we are reducing the amount of people that can be on a bus at any given time for social distancing purposes. So really working with your employer to understand that there isn't the same options that there were before, and that a good work around that is to not try and take the bus when everyone else is taking the bus. We do have another question. Is there a way of tracking how frequently buses are having to pass up potential riders due to capacity? like someone who might be waiting at a bus stop and is having to be passed up. Are you guys able to track that?
So Graydon might know the actual number. We do track that and use that to plan our service in the short term and the longer term. And this metric was particularly important sort of in the early days of reduced schedule. And Graydon, I don't know if you have anything kind of more recent there.
Right. No, I think that's totally accurate, and that's we do track that. I think one area that we are, in addition to that piece of information, we are tracking as essentially what the passenger loads are on each trip. So each time it's passing that stop, we do have data that says, is it over capacity? So in addition to that information that we're basing decisions on that Sean mentioned, we are able to look at a trip level that's serving a stop. Is it leaving at capacity? And we can infer from that there's a pretty good likelihood that if someone's there, that they may be passed up. So those are the kinds of trips and the kinds of areas where if we see high passenger loads, that we would look to add service, both scheduled, like I mentioned, for September, or ad hoc as it's observed in a mid between service changes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We still have plenty of time for additional questions. If you have things that you would like to be answered or feel like you have follow-up questions to anything that's already been asked, please enter those into the question and answer box now.
While we wait for to see if we have additional questions, I did want to let folks know that if you do have questions about this and you are a larger company, we do have resources with the Commute Trip Reduction program, both in the city of Seattle through Commute Seattle, as well as King County Metro for Shoreline and some other communities. So please do reach out to your CTR rep as well. We can certainly help you answer these questions for your employees and come up with plans to help as you go back to work.
Absolutely. And if you're a smaller business that is not affected by the commute trip reduction, then you can also just reach out directly to Commute Seattle. We offer free consultations. We can talk you through a lot of the different options for your employees if you're considering a return to the office. If you're planning to stay teleworking and working remote in the short to midterm, we can also support you to create policies and programs that will make that experience better from the administrative side of things, but also more positive and supportive environment for employees as well. Someone asked, could the bus load limits be stated again?
This is Sean. Yeah, it's currently 12 passengers for a 40-foot bus, 18 passengers for a 60-foot bus. It's also possible we'd be able to increase these as we sort of advance through various phases.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's the hope. And it's really something that we just have to watch the trends of infections in our state and whatnot, but those are the current limits. What's the best way for employees, businesses, just general public to stay up to date on Metro's COVID responses, changes, and news? I think a blog was mentioned.
I would direct people to our reduced schedule page. So that's kingcounty.gov/reduced schedule. And we also do have the King County Metro Matters blog. So
Right.
Those are probably your two best sources. Also, please sign up for trip alerts, and our Twitter channel is also up to date.
And Rocco just shared the link to the blog in the chat box. I will also include all of these things in the follow-up email that we'll be sending to all participants today. There was a question about the status of ORCA Next Gen and could it be fast-tracked to help with new technology use now?
So to my knowledge, there's not a plan to move that project on a faster timeline.
Great, thank you. Sorry, this is a longer question. Is there accountability for buses that reach bus stops a couple minutes early during this reduced scheduled time, or guidelines about drivers waiting at that stop for a certain amount of time to ensure that riders can catch buses on the times that they are scheduled?
So it's a great question because it's a particularly challenging time to operate bus service at a set schedule when travel and traffic generally is so unpredictable and is changing. So that is one thing that we do focus on, and there is accountability in that our service is planned with run basically travel times between stops, and as that changes really quickly, we are working quickly to modify our schedules to reflect that reality that's on the ground, but also recognize that reality is changing really quickly, and so and also different at different rates in different areas. So we are focusing on addressing that on the scheduling side, so that our schedules are reflective of the travel times it takes to get between stops. But we also, I think, with that in mind, I think every bus passenger is focused on when trying to learn when their bus is going to be there, and there are third-party tools available that we do support with our data, like One Bus Away. That's a great resource that enables you to see when the bus is coming to your stop and updates as the bus is traveling mid-route. So that's one tool that I would encourage folks to use to kind of mitigate some of that uncertainty as we respond to these changes in travel times that we're actively trying to keep up with and adapt our schedules to. But yeah, I think that's some of the guidance I would give, but feel free to add anyone else on the panel.
And we did have another just follow-up question about bus capacity and riders. So when that threshold for 12 to 18 riders is met and there's that many on the bus, the bus won't be picking up additional riders at that point, correct?
Yes, that's accurate. So they would pass up additional riders looking to board, and then they would radio back, and we would send a additional bus to the extent that we can. The one exception I would make is if people were getting off a bus, so if someone is trying to get off at a stop, it's possible that more passengers could be looking to board, particularly at the stage when we're doing backdoor boarding. So again, we ask passengers to sort of look and see, and if a coach looks like it's at capacity, to again allow some extra time such that they could board the next bus if that's possible for them.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's a very challenging thing for a operator to enforce, especially when it is backdoor boarding. So I'm sure that they're doing it to the best of their abilities, and the ratios are staying very close to that number. We have a little less than 10 minutes left, so if you have any other pressing questions, we'll give it a couple more minutes. How long will fares be suspended?
So it's a good question. It's at least through August. The reason fares were suspended was guided by safety. So essentially, we moved to backdoor boarding because of the challenges of that sort of close proximity interaction between boarding passengers and the operators. So because payment on most of our system is at the front door, that's the reason we suspended fares and did so across our system, just kind of to make it a uniform decision. So there's a lot of work right now taking place to ensure that process can be reinstated in a safe way. So something that we are working on is a clear plastic, transparent, kind of hard plastic health partition that would go at the front of the bus between a boarding passenger and an operator. So once we have those, and hopefully September, but again, we want to lead with safety on this point, we'd be able to reinstate fares.
Excellent, thank you. Just as a quick note on that, Metro and Kitsap County are currently fare-free. Our other transit agency partners have started charging fares at this time. So that's Sound Transit, Pierce, Community Transit, as well as Everett Transit.
And there was just a quick question about the accuracy of One Bus Away. I know One Bus Away is a third-party platform, but what sort of is there any effort to continue to improve the accuracy of that app for Metro services, and what would that look like?
Yeah, we are continuing to do our best to keep third-party apps up to date as best as we can. So we reduced our service in March, had a couple of subsequent reductions, increased our service at the end of June back up to 85% of COVID levels, and will remain in reduced schedule even through the September service change. So we've been doing some work and telling people to double check their trips, particularly trips that are less frequent on our schedule or through our Metro platforms to make sure that it is still running. The accuracy has improved, and we're kind of committed to continuing to ensure that what people are seeing, regardless of their platform, represents what's taking place on the network.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Just a couple more minutes if anyone else has any remaining questions. We really appreciate everyone's participation today. Everyone from Metro who was willing to share this super valuable information. These are a lot of questions that we've been receiving from our clients and our customers. And I think people are really eager to return to public transportation, return to commuting into downtown and moving throughout our city in efficient ways. So we're really grateful that Metro has offered all of this information in this form.
It's hard to watch hockey on TV, so you got to get there at some point, right?
Yeah, yes, especially now that we know the team name that we'll be rooting for. So I'll give it about one more minute if there's any remaining questions. Can we expect another webinar in August with updates? Potentially a little after August, I think would be helpful. This is so we're already more than halfway through July, but I do think that there's a lot of sources on Metro's websites and blogs where you can be kept up to date. As Sean mentioned, there's going to be a lot of things in paid advertising and press. And if you have any pressing questions, you can always reach out to a Metro representative. If they don't have those questions, I'm sure they'll pass it on to the right department, or you can reach out to Commute Seattle directly. And if we don't know the answer ourselves, we will know who to connect you with. We do plan to do webinars pretty continually in the upcoming months. We found that they're very well attended and that people are gaining really valuable information. And there are so many moving pieces that if some big developments come out in the future, we'd be happy to share those again in a webinar format.
I know there's a question, somebody brought up the one bus away. I can give my personal kind of knowledge on this. So I will say I'm not speaking for Metro and specifically when a bus tracker is activated. But as someone without a car and on a bus route that has frequently passed by fast buses, I would recommend folks give it about a 3 to 4 minute buffer. In many cases, if you look at one bus away and track the bus, they are updated about every 1 to 3 minutes on average. So there can be some lag on the actual current location of the bus. So giving it a few minutes extra will give you a better chance of getting to that bus. The other thing, as far as when the signal is picked up. I mean, just like your cell phone, there's going to be some places where we're going to be out of range or in a valley or something along those lines, and it might cause the tracker to be a few minutes later than that. So just give yourselves a few extra minutes and you should be fine.
Yeah, I would always encourage people to give themselves a few extra minutes, especially in a time now when routes are less frequent. You want to really ensure that you're getting on the bus at the time that you're hoping to get on one. Well, we are just about at time. I just want to thank everyone again for participating, for such wonderful questions. Thank you, Sean, Rocco, Graydon, and Salam for your valuable information. I will be sending out a follow-up email with a lot of this information with these PowerPoint slides and a recording of this presentation if you would like to share it within your team or you want to go back and reference some of the answers that we provided. Please reach out to myself or someone else from Commute Seattle or anyone from Metro if you do have additional questions. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day, everybody.